Hello everyone. In this video we are going to be talking about how to create complex data apps by using the advanced list, tab, and button functionality within the SnAPPii WYSIWYG editor. You can see here I have an app open that I have been working on related to apartments in New York City. I have a tab right here, which actually is an advanced list tab, and within this tab I have a number of different lists pulled together by way of what we call relationships, which allows data in one list to relate to data in another list. What I'm going to do is walk you through the process on the back end of how we created our dynamic data lists and how we pull that information into the app for the users to see in various ways. The first thing you need to do to pull complex information into your app and display by way of advanced lists is to create data sources. Right here in the WYSIWYG editor, you want to click on Data Source, and you can see here that I already have some data sources in place. I have pre-uploaded these lists, and I will go through them and show you what they entail and how they tie together by way of relationships. When we're talking about data sources within SnAPPii, we're talking about two different types of data sources. One is the information the way I have it here, which is information that I compiled in various spreadsheets and then uploaded into the WYSIWYG editor. The other way to pull in a data source is by way of what we call a data connector. That is connecting to a web service. Down here, for example, you can see we have some data source templates with connectors that we have already created for you. So here you can see we have a few different Salesforce data connectors. You have the ability with advanced lists to create a data connector and then display information, for example, Salesforce leads, in your app to individual users based on their Salesforce login credentials. You can utilize any of the data connectors that we have already created or create your own data connector. I'm not going to go into details in this particular video on how to create a data connector, but we do have a video available that walks you through not only a webinar of data connectors and how they work, but also a step-by-step tutorial to show you how to create a data connector. We also have a detailed user manual on our site under the resources section that you have the opportunity, as I'm talking about creating relationships using data sources and pulling them into your app by way of advanced lists, that you can do this using data sources that are spreadsheets or data sources that are data connectors, or both. So when you are uploading a spreadsheet to use as a data source, you are simply going to take the spreadsheet that you have created. You are going to click Add here, upload your spreadsheet, and once you have done that, you will see all of the information for that spreadsheet as far as the headers that you have created and the column types that SnAPPii believes are associated with those headers right here in this area of the editor. I am going to click on a spreadsheet that I've already uploaded here, district information, and what this is related to our New York City apartment app is a list of New York City districts that I wanted to put in here to divide out for my users. So for example, Manhattan, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and so forth. I included a picture of a particular site in that area that users might recognize. I also have some description information about that area of New York City, and I have an ID field. This is key to creating relationships within your data sources, and you will see as I click on the other data sources I have in the editor that the ID field is consistent between all of those sources. This is the unique identifier that tells each list how to talk to each other. We suggest using something as simple as a numeric list starting from 1 and increasing up to however many numbers you need based on the information that you have in your spreadsheet. That unique identifier, again, will be critical in being able to map any number of lists together, because that ID number tells one list to relate to that same ID number in another list. It is also possible in some of your lists that you may have more than one ID field. That may be because you have one list that relates to one spreadsheet for a particular relationship, And then that same list relates to another spreadsheet for a different type of relationship. In order to not have all of the information confused, the first two spreadsheets would have a unique identifier in the ID field, and the first and last spreadsheet would have a different unique identifier tying them together. So once you have uploaded your spreadsheet here, SnAPPii will try to automatically determine what type of information you have in your spreadsheet based on the name or type of information it pulls in and believes it is. So as you can see here for district, which is the name of my district like Brooklyn or the Bronx, SnAPPii has identified that it is text. For my picture, it knows that it's an image. For the ID, it will automatically come up as being numeric because it is a number, and there are other reasons for data sources where you would keep it as numeric. And so by default, that is how SnAPPii identifies it. However, for the purposes of creating relationships, you want to be sure that your ID field, even though it is a number, shows up in your data source as text. You also have the option to make any of your fields, with the exception of an image, searchable or sortable, again, depending on how you would like to present that information to your users. You want to be sure to give your spreadsheet a name. And over here under type, you can see data table or web service. By default, it will always show as data table, and you will always want to leave it as data table, unless you are creating a data connector, as we have done down here, in which case you would then select web service. Once you have gotten all of the information from your spreadsheet uploaded and named here, you want to be sure to save your data. Anytime that you make a change to any particular spreadsheet or data source within the editor, you want to be sure to save it before you move to another data source. Even if it is a data source that has already been saved in the editor, if you then go back in, make changes, and forget to hit save and go into one of your other spreadsheets or data sources, the information you just changed will not be saved. So you want to be sure to save that before you move on. Taking a look at our other spreadsheets here, we have apartment type. And this is a very small spreadsheet, as you can see. This information is specifically related to the different types of apartments that are available in the different districts. So studio apartments, lofts, condos, and so forth. The only information that I want to have in this particular spreadsheet is the type of apartment, the ID field, which you saw also in our district info spreadsheet, because I'm going to be tying these two spreadsheets together with a relationship, and then the ID1 field. In this case, I am also going to be tying my apartment type to my next spreadsheet, my property details. So I need to have a different unique identifier for these two lists than for the first two lists. And then under property details, this is where I will have all of the information regarding my different properties. So here I have the name of the property, I have a description, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, and so forth. And right here I have my unique identifier, my ID1 field. Again, this one spreadsheet happens to relate to my apartment type spreadsheet. And so this is the identifier I have tied these two spreadsheets together with. Since my third spreadsheet here, property details, does not directly relate to my district info spreadsheet, I do not also need to have a second unique identifier just called ID, as I did for these first two. So again, once I have all of the information uploaded from my spreadsheet, I've renamed it, and I'm set to go. I want to hit save. Once you have all of your data sources for any particular relationship uploaded in the editor, you can then move forward to actually creating those relationships. That is the second step in building these complex data lists for your mobile app. So we're going to go back to our first spreadsheet here, and when we talk about relationships within SnAPPii, There are three different options for relationships. So I'm going to click on the Manage Relationships button here, and this is how we are going to be able to tie our different spreadsheets together. So the different types of relationships that we have are one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. One-to-one refers to having two spreadsheets that I want to tie together where one line item or row of information relates to only one line item or row of information in my other spreadsheet. So for example, if my first spreadsheet listed my different districts like Manhattan and the Bronx, and underneath that spreadsheet I only had one property available in Manhattan and one property available in the Bronx, that would be a one-to-one relationship. For a one-to-many relationship, it is exactly the same, except for Manhattan, I might have 5 different properties available to view, and for the Bronx, I might have 3 different properties. That is a one-to-many relationship. For a many-to-many relationship, again, I may have many line items on my first list, for example, Manhattan and the Bronx, and have that relate to many line items on my second list. So Manhattan might relate to the property type on my spreadsheet. It might also relate to specific details on my property, like, for example, property managers or pricing, and I want to tie those things specifically together. In this example, using the spreadsheets I have already uploaded, we're going to talk about one-to-many relationships. So right here you can see that there is information already down here in the existing relationship field. This is only because I have already created those relationships. And now I'm going to show you how that occurred. So up here I'm going to click my one-to-many relationship type. My related fields here, data source, ID, and label fields. These are regarding the spreadsheet that I am tying my first spreadsheet, district information, to. So in this case, I'm tying my district information spreadsheet to my apartment type spreadsheet. Right here, I'm going to select apartment type. In my related ID field, I've selected ID in this case because it is the field that I am tying to my district info. You'll notice that ID 1 also shows that is being used when I tie my apartment type spreadsheet to my property details spreadsheet, and I'll show you that in just a moment. And then the label field, really I only have one label to choose from, and that is type, relating to the type of apartment that I'm listing. The current fields, both current ID and current label, relate to the spreadsheet that I am tying from. So I am tying my district info spreadsheet to my apartment type spreadsheet. So my district info spreadsheet is my current spreadsheet that I am tying from. So here under current ID field, again, really, your related ID field and your current ID field will be exactly the same. And my current label field is district because I want to show my users the names of the district first and then the types of properties that are available within that district next. Once you have your relationship created, you simply hit Add, and that relationship will now appear right here under the existing relationships field. You can also check to be sure that you have in fact tied the two spreadsheets together in the way that you would like by closing out of here, making sure you hit Save, and then moving to the spreadsheet that you created the relationship with. So in this case, I tied my district info to my apartment type. So now I'm going to click on my apartment type, click on Manage Relationships. And again, this was a one-to-many relationship that I created. And I can see right here, parent data source and an associated relationship. Relationships basically work in a parent-child formula. So my parent data source, which was my first level of information I wanted to show my user, was my district info. And my child data source, the spreadsheet that I tied to, in this case apartment type, is my child, which shows right here. You also can see that there is a second relationship that is listed here. Again, a relationship that I already created. And this is the relationship that ties the apartment type spreadsheet to the property details spreadsheet. So again, following the process that we just did with our first two spreadsheets, I am going to click on the one-to-many relationship type. My related information is my property details spreadsheet. So I want to click property details. My ID field in this case is ID 1 because it is the unique identifier that I've listed in both my apartment spreadsheet and my property details spreadsheet. My label field here, in this case, I could pick any of these, but for my purposes, I want the name of the property to be the first thing that is listed underneath the apartment type. So when the user clicks on any of the different types of apartments, the first thing they will see are the names of the properties that are underneath that specific apartment type. And then my current ID fields, again, are related to my apartment type spreadsheet. That is the spreadsheet that I am marrying from. So in this case, ID 1, again, always just to be sure you have picked the right ID field. If you do have multiples, you just want to be sure that the related ID field and current ID field are the same. And then the current label field, I'm going to pick type as the label to tie these together. Once I've created that relationship, I can hit close, make sure that I save. And then to confirm that that relationship does exist, I can click on Property Details, hit Manage Relationships. Again, this was a one-to-many relationship that I created. And right here, you can see my parent data source is apartment type, and my child relationship is my Property Details spreadsheet. Once you have all of your relationships set up and saved, you can close out of your data sources, and the third step in creating your relationships is providing the information to your users by way of your advanced lists. Now that we are back at our app view, again, I said in the beginning of the video that we had an apartment advanced list right here that we had already created. And I'm going to walk you through how we did that. The first step being to drop an advanced list tab down onto the tab bar. Once you've done that, this is the view that you are going to see right here. Your view, the title right here, we chose to name it apartments. Of course, you can name it whatever it is that relates to the information you're providing. Will go right up here in this title bar. This is very helpful for you to know what level you're on within your app when you're working on it, especially if you have multiple layers of lists. Giving it a title is also very helpful for your users to know how to navigate throughout the various screens in your app. The tab name is what goes down here. Although you can't see it, our advanced list tab for our apartments is just underneath the box here. But the tab name, again, would go right here and helps identify for your users what that specific tab relates to. You can also change your icon if you don't like the default icon that we provide for that tab. We have a number of icons that you can select within our icon library, or you could upload one from your computer with the recommended sizing and alpha transparency. Clicking on Security, this relates to whether or not you want your users to be able to add or edit information within your advanced lists. There is detailed information in the user manual, again under the Resources section of the SnAPPii.com website, which will take you through the different types of user management and how to set that up, both within items like your lists themselves and over here in the app settings area. There may be instances where you either want information to be added and edited, or you only want certain users to be able to see certain information within your app. User permissions and security allow you to make those choices. The list view is really the heart of how your information is going to be presented to your users. In this first level of information, so the top layer, the first thing that I want my users to see when they click on my apartment tab are the names of the districts, Manhattan, the Bronx, and so forth. So the data source that I have selected in this case is district info. You can see all three of my data sources show here, and depending on the number of data sources you have uploaded, all of them will be listed here for you to choose from. That allows you to create many lists by way of tabs or buttons within your app for various reasons using the same data sources. So in this case, as I said, I've chosen district info. My list view, also called cell view, I've titled apartments. I've also titled my detail view apartments, simply to make it easier for myself and again for your users to navigate through the various screens. But here is really where I can determine how I present this information to my users. The list view template determines that first level of information that is presented to my users. If I click on change here, there are three different templates that I could use by default. So if I clicked on any one of these templates, for example, the first one here, it gives me any option that I could pick from to display the information. Obviously, since I only had one image in my spreadsheet, the only thing that I can choose for an image is my associated photo. If, however, I want to have complete flexibility on how I display this information to my users, I will click Custom View. And the only thing that I have to predetermine for my custom view is the height I want my cell to be. This is somewhat trial and error. If the information that you're presenting is something like this, an image and perhaps a header, or an image, a header, and some brief details, typically cell height between 80 and 100 is an appropriate amount. However, again, it is going to be trial and error, so once you get inside your cell view and you put the information in, you may need to come back here and adjust your cell height to be sure that you can get everything in that you would like to display to your users. And then the detail view template, same thing, we click on change. You can see here I've got 4 different options that I could select from, and then simply pull my drop-down menus to say which item I want to show up in which area. Or, again, to have complete flexibility in how this information is presented to my users, I want to use my custom view. And once I've made that selection, you can click OK. And then the last piece of information here is email settings. This only relates in those instances where you may have advanced list information being executed by your users and then submitted to you by email. Typically, if you have detailed information that's being presented within your app, the way I do, where I have apartment listings with the districts, then the apartment types, and then all of the details about those particular apartments, I'm not using the email settings in this case because the information is all being presented as a resource. I do, however, have the availability within my advanced lists to still have executables for my user. For example, on the property details level of my lists, I have the opportunity for my users to call me, send an email me, or submit a form to request information. Once you have all of this information set in the first level of your list, you can click OK. Now what you'll see is the back end of the list information that you're going to present to the user. You'll notice that both the cell view and the detail view show with the edit option. This is because we picked custom as our 2 view options rather than selecting one of the pre-built templates of information. If you had selected the template for the list view or cell view here and or the detail view, then you would just see a grayed out bar that said cell view or detail view. In this case, since we picked the custom option, you see the ability to edit both. So we're going to click into our cell view, and what you see here are properties that I have already pulled into my view. So what I did was bring an image button right here. I brought it over and dropped it here, and then I told the image what I wanted it to pull from. So we're going to go into the back end of our app so that you can see this information here. I'm going to click on my edit button. When I pulled over my image button, this is what opened up. I have the opportunity to determine the height and width of my image. In this case, I selected 80 because the cell height that I selected was 80, and I wanted my image to fill in that full height area. I can also specify my image if I want to have something specific showing here and showing consistently throughout this particular level of list. So for example, if what I wanted to show was my logo and every item on this list at the first level I wanted my logo to show, I would select my icon and then select constant. In this case, however, what I want to show up here when my users see this first level of list is all of the pictures that relate to my various districts. So I have Brooklyn, the Bronx, and so forth, and I uploaded a picture within my spreadsheet to go with each one of those districts. Since I want that particular picture to show up related to each district, I'm going to tell the image button that I want it to pull from my data source and that I want it to pull my picture, and click OK. My text here, I did the same thing as with my image. I dropped in a text button right here, put it onto my screen, and then this is what you see here. This information right here is just a placeholder for the information that you want to put into this text box. Again, if I wanted specific text to show up that I always wanted to show up on my list, I would put that text in here and I would click constant. However, since what I want to show up on this level of my list is the names of my different districts in New York City, I am going to select again my data source, and I'm going to tell it that I want it to pull district because that is where the name of the district specifically is listed. I also have the option to choose the size of my font, how I want it to align in my cell, and the various colors that I can choose from, as well as the width of my text. Once I finish that, I click OK, and now the first level of my list that my users will see is all set. If I click back, I now am going to go into my details view and pull that information together. So going into my detail view, what you'll see here, this is again an image button. Just like we did in our cell view, we pulled over an image button. I'm going to open it up here for you and followed exactly the same process. I have tied it to my data source and told it that I want it to pull from my picture. This is the same picture that I'm showing on my very first level of my list, the picture of the district, only now it's a much larger photo. On the detail view of your list, when you select a photo that is coming from your data source, what will show here is the SnAPPii logo, and that is always the case, although what the user sees in the app is the actual photo of the district. Here, again, I pulled over a text box, and inside the text box, I told it I wanted it to tie to my data source and to be the description. In this case, the description of my district, and clicked OK. Right here is where your information begins to add levels of complexity. I am inside the detail view of my first list, my district list. Right here, I have actually dropped in another advanced list, and I have done this by way of an advanced button right here. This very first advanced list that I dropped down to create all of this was a tab, which is right here, and we dropped it down on our tab bar. Now with my advanced list, I am actually taking an advanced list button, dropping it inside the detail view of my first level of list, and now I am going to create my next level of advanced list information. When we click on the Edit button here, since I had already dropped the advanced list down here, you can see that this looks extremely similar to when we pull down the Advanced List tab. You can give it a label. You can specify a photo instead of giving it a name. You can also choose the type of view that you want to use here. For example, you might make this just a button. I'm going to do this so that you can see. Now it is just a small button which the user can click on. If you decided to go with a button, you could make it larger by changing the height and width. You could have it be text only, or you could have it be a photo. I'm going to go back into the element here and click on the view. You also can choose a framed view. That is actually what we had in here before I made that change. I'm going to click OK. And this is a whole frame right here. Going back in here again, I also could have chosen to have this show as an icon. For example, I could pick something from my pre-built list. I could choose something from my pre-built library. I could upload an image from my computer, or I could find something on the web. Just to show you what it would look like if I selected an icon, I'm going to pick one, click OK, and click OK again. I have the ability to choose the framed view right here, which is what we had before. When we first opened up this list, I had already selected that. And I could choose to give it the label, available rentals, or whatever it is you're going to call your list, or I could specify an icon. In my case, I've chosen to label it. Security is the same as it was before, with choosing whether or not your users can make changes to your list and or whether or not they can even see the list, depending on the type of user that they are. Your list view, again, this is exactly like what we just went through before. So we are on our second level of list. Our first level was our district names. When the user sees that level of list and clicks on it, they're going to get the photo of the district, a description, and then a large button or frame that they can click on to bring them down to the next level of information. In this case, my data source was apartment type. So although here what you see is one button, what the user is going to see are several different items in the list with all of the different apartment types. So condos, duplexes, studio apartments, and so forth. And this list is really that top level that they are then going to be able to click on and get down to more information. So right here, again, I can choose from one of the template options, or I can go with a custom view. Because I want full flexibility in the information I display, I am going with custom view here. And then my detail view, once my user clicks on a type of apartment they are interested in, the information below that type is listed in the detail view. And again, I have picked custom view for my option so that I have more flexibility in what my user sees. My email settings, again, if I were going to have this information emailed to me as opposed to displayed whenever the user executed something on the list, and then configuring my element, this is the only thing that is different than my tab. Here, you also can determine if you want your button or frame view to be text only, or as we showed up in the view, be a photo. You can determine whether it is the standard rounded corner that is often used in apps, or the square or rectangular corners. And you can also choose whether or not you want the glossiness to be applied. Once you've made all of these changes, you can click OK, and now your list is ready for details beneath it. Clicking on this list, you can see then available rentals, and you can edit your cell view and edit your detail view, just as we did at the district level. If we click on the cell view, you can see in this case I have a photo and text just like I did at that first district level of my list. In this case, my photo is a logo that I have consistent throughout this entire list. I picked my image, which was my logo in this case, and I selected constant here instead of data source because I want this logo to show up at each one of my list items: studio apartment, condo, duplex, and so forth. If I wanted a different picture to show up with each one of my apartment types, and I had put a different photo in the spreadsheet for each one of my apartment types, then I would click Data Source here, and in my image field, I could click an image or photo. There is not one listed here because I did not put one in my spreadsheet to begin with at this level. Click OK, and again with my text, I followed the same process as before. I brought my text button over and dropped it down, and then I determined what information I wanted to show here. In this case, it is coming from my data source, and it is the apartment type itself that I want to show. Going back then, and into my detail view, we selected the frame view. So in order to see the information and customize how we want it to show to our user, you need to double click on this screen. And now you can see our detail view button again. Click on it, and here is that detailed view for our property details. It is already filled in because this is information that I have pre-populated. We dropped in a text button or element here, selected our data source, and put property name as the first piece of information that shows here. Right here, we've done the same thing, brought in a text element or button. In this case, we have tied it to our cost. So this is where users will see how much it costs for them to rent this property per month. Our photo right here is a photo of the property that we put within our property details spreadsheet. Again, selecting our data source and tying it to the picture. Down here, we have a detailed description about the property. Bedrooms and bathrooms, because I wanted these to always be listed, when I dropped my text element over, I told it what I wanted it to say and selected constant because I want every time the user clicks on one of these different properties to see bedrooms or bathrooms listed. And then the type of bedrooms or bathrooms that are available, in this case studio, which I just put as a placeholder because I have defined here I want my actual information from my data source and number of bedrooms to populate here. And down here, these are the executables that I mentioned earlier. My user has clicked on a district. They've gone in and seen the different property types that I offer. They've clicked on a type of property. They have seen a list of all of the properties available in that type. And now they are down at the property details level. This might be a property that they are interested in learning more about, and so I have given them several options to do that. For example, email. I have taken my email button, dropped it down, and when you open it up here, you will see I've labeled it email, but you can label it whatever you would like. I actually changed the icon from the default icon that was available, and you can do that again by clicking the Specify Your Icon button, choosing something from our pre-built library, finding an image on the web, or uploading one from your computer. I can choose the height and width of my icon, determine if I actually do want it to be a photo or text only, and then whether or not it's going to be tied to my data source and what field it will be tied to. The same is true for each one of these elements. I can drop it down and I can configure it to either tie to my data source or be constant. Right here, I have actually created a little form for my users to fill out. In order to do that, I have simply taken the form button right here, dropped it onto my screen, and here you can see what that looks like. I can label and title it, specify my icon. Submitting by email is one way that you could have users fill out this form and contact you. You can predetermine the email address or addresses that the form will go to once it is submitted. You can also determine your subject line. In this case, for example, we might want to make it something like new inquiry on a property. You can determine how many times you want forms to be filled out before they are submitted to you. In this case, I want a form submitted to me every time a user fills it out. But if, for example, you only wanted to receive these forms in bulk after 5 forms were filled out by 5 different users, you can determine that right here. You can also select whether or not you want it to be sent in the body of the email, by spreadsheet, or by PDF. Another option would be to have the information submitted by web post. Doing that, you can choose the web post mode, determine if it is a get or post method. So a get method might be something like a form that you want the users to fill out and then immediately have some information returned to them. For example, with weather, you have the opportunity to create a form where when the user puts in their zip code, it will return for them the weather for their specific area. And the post mode obviously is just the opposite. The information that the user fills out in the form would be posted somewhere to the web based on the URL that you have specified. You can configure your element for height and width, as well as whether or not it is text only, the corners, and the glossiness. You also have the ability to put time settings so that if this is time-sensitive information, for example, submitting an inquiry on an apartment, you might want it to be time-stamped specifically so that you know when the user completed that form. And then going into the form itself, just so you can get an idea of what it looks like here, we've created a very simple form to ask for the user's name, their email address, phone number, and a message. As well, we have put some information right here, again, by way of dropping a text button. Since I had chosen to have this form submitted by email, every time a user completes a form about a particular property, I will receive an email on the back end with all of the information that the user has filled out. So again, in order to create complex data apps that allow you to pull in information from various spreadsheets that you have uploaded or from a data connector that you have built, you first need to create your data sources by either uploading spreadsheets or utilizing a pre-built data connector or connector that you have built, perhaps to your MySQL server or some other database on your back end. You would make sure that the information by way of a spreadsheet or data connector was uploaded and saved. You would then create the relationship that ties one of your data sources to another. In this case, I've created a one-to-many relationship and tied my district info and my apartment type together. You then would create your various levels of lists, either by dropping down an advanced list tab or perhaps on a screen that had other information, dropping an advanced list button. In this case, we chose a tab. Configuring that tab, including how your list will show up to your users, and then configuring your list views and detail views, which is how that information is going to be presented to the user, including the ability to open a list, drop in another advanced list, and perhaps even underneath that, drop in another list. And that is all there is to creating complex data apps using the Advanced List tab and Advanced List button